Japan has made a policy shift that could redefine its position in global security markets, but the long-term consequences remain uncertain. Under Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi, the government has lifted restrictions on exporting lethal military equipment, opening the possibility for fighter jets, missiles, and warships to enter international markets. One concrete indicator of scale is a $7 billion naval agreement with Australia, signaling that this transition is already tied to real contracts rather than abstract policy. What this analysis explores is how Japan reached this point, what changes if this policy expands or stalls, and why regional responses remain measured. At a structural level, the decision alters Japan's post-war framework. If fully implemented, Japan moves from a defense-focused industrial base into an active exporter of military systems. If constrained by domestic politics or external pressure, it reinforces long-standing limits tied to its pacifist identity. Either outcome affects alliance dynamics in the Indo-Pacific, where countries are reassessing supply chains and security dependencies in response to evolving geopolitical conditions. The historical foundation of this policy shift is rooted in Japan's post-1945 settlement. After the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan adopted a constitution that renounced war as a sovereign right. Article 9 restricted military activity to self-defense and shaped decades of policy. By 1967, Japan formalized restrictions on arms exports, and in 1976, it effectively prohibited the export of lethal weapons. This framework limited the defense sector to domestic use and constrained international cooperation to non-lethal technologies such as surveillance and logistics systems. This structure began to shift in the 2010s as regional security conditions changed. North Korea's missile development programs, China's military expansion, and evolving expectations within the U.S. alliance system created pressure for reinterpretation. Successive governments gradually eased restrictions, allowing limited defense collaboration and technology transfers. However, the current policy marks a more significant step by removing the core prohibition on lethal exports, signaling a broader recalibration of Japan's strategic posture. The updated framework introduces a conditional export mechanism. In principle, all categories of defense equipment can be transferred abroad, provided recipient countries commit to using them in accordance with the United Nations Charter. Initial reports suggest that at least 17 countries are eligible, with scope for expansion through bilateral agreements. Potential partners include Australia, New Zealand, the Philippines, and Indonesia, all of which are engaged in security cooperation arrangements with the United States and are seeking to diversify procurement sources. The timing of this policy is linked to concrete industrial developments. Japan has finalized an agreement in which Mitsubishi Heavy Industries will construct the first 3 of 11 naval vessels for Australia. The deal, valued at approximately $7 billion, represents one of Japan's largest defense export commitments. It demonstrates that policy adjustments are aligned with industrial capacity and existing demand, rather than being purely anticipatory. Key actors influence the direction and interpretation of this shift. Sanai Takaichi has advocated for strengthening Japan's defense capabilities and aligning them with contemporary security requirements. Her administration has argued that the current environment is sufficiently complex that no single country can ensure its security independently. At the regional level, responses have been cautious. China's foreign ministry, represented by Guo Jiakun, has indicated that Beijing is monitoring Japan's actions closely and views expanded military activity with concern. Historical memory adds another layer of sensitivity. Takaichi's reported offering to Yasukuni Shrine has drawn attention because the site commemorates more than 1,000 individuals convicted of war crimes, including 14 classified as class of following World War II. Actions associated with the shrine have historically generated diplomatic friction with China and South Korea. where wartime experiences remain politically significant. This context amplifies scrutiny of Japan's evolving defense policies. The broader power dynamics extend beyond regional actors. The United States remains Japan's central security partner and has encouraged greater burden sharing among allies. Expanding Japan's defense export capacity aligns with this objective by enabling Tokyo to contribute more directly to collective security while strengthening its domestic industrial base. This approach fits within wider Indo-Pacific strategies focused on maintaining balance without direct escalation. One possible scenario involves successful expansion of Japan's defense exports. In this case, Japan could emerge as a competitive supplier in a market traditionally dominated by the United States, Russia, and European manufacturers. Increased competition may lower procurement costs and diversify supply chains for countries in Southeast Asia and beyond. Nations such as the Philippines and Indonesia could reduce reliance on a limited number of suppliers, potentially reshaping procurement patterns. However, this scenario also increases the circulation of advanced weapons systems, which may introduce additional risks in contested regions such as the South China Sea. A second scenario involves constraints on implementation. Domestic public opinion in Japan has historically favored pacifism, and legal or political challenges could limit the scope of exports. If opposition intensifies or regional tensions escalate, the government may adopt a more restrictive approach, allowing only selective transfers under tightly defined conditions. In this case, Japan would maintain a more limited role, focusing on defensive cooperation rather than broad participation in global arms markets. The geopolitical consequences depend on which trajectory prevails. An expanded defense export role could strengthen alliance networks and support deterrence strategies by increasing interoperability and resource sharing among partner states. At the same time, it introduces new variables into regional security calculations. Neighboring countries may interpret the shift as a departure from established norms, potentially influencing their own defense planning and procurement strategies. Another dimension involves economic implications. Developing an export-oriented defense sector can generate industrial growth, technological innovation, and employment opportunities. However, it also requires navigating regulatory frameworks, export controls, and diplomatic considerations. Balancing commercial objectives with strategic responsibilities will be a key challenge for policymakers. What distinguishes this moment is the convergence of historical constraints, economic incentives, and strategic pressures. Japan is adjusting its policies in response to changes in the regional and global environment while remaining anchored to a constitutional framework that emphasizes restraint. This creates a complex decision-making landscape where incremental adjustments carry broader symbolic and practical significance. As developments continue, the most relevant indicators will include the number and scale of approved export agreements, the evolution of bilateral defense partnerships, and responses from regional governments. The pace at which contracts are executed and the degree of transparency in decision-making will provide insight into how the policy is being implemented. Ultimately, this shift represents a test of adaptation. Japan is evaluating how to align its post-war identity with contemporary security requirements without creating instability. The outcome will depend on how effectively it manages the balance between continuity and change, and how other actors respond to its evolving role in the international system.